Hey everyone, and welcome to the Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E. Silva. Today, joining me on the Private Podcast is Vuk Janosevic, the co-founder and CEO of Blindnet. Blindnet is a data privacy software startup that builds software designed to help businesses pursue their goals while protecting the privacy of their customers. And now, over to the conversation with Vuk Janosevic. All right, and like I said off the top, we have Vuk Janosevic here joining us here on the Private Podcast. Vuk, thanks a lot for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Derek, for having me. Quite excited to be chatting and obviously sharing our perspective on building a privacy-first world.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this. I was reading some of your work in preparation for the discussion, and I've definitely got some questions that came up, especially around the cookies. I want to get your feedback on that. But
Absolutely.
first, tell us a little bit about your background and your journey into being starting BlindNet and being building this company around privacy engineering.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell you how myself and the founding team of Blindnet actually came together. We came from different sort of facets of business, and we all sort of experienced the same quote unquote burn of privacy in the modern world. So myself, I studied computer science as an undergrad, worked as a software developer for a startup company, and then even though I loved studying computer science, I pretty quickly realized that it's like, hey, this is not my career call. I am just way too extroverted to be an engineer, and this is, I don't want to offend any extroverted developers out there, but I did not see this as a career call. So I pivoted my career. I went again, quote unquote, to the dark side. I went to a business school, but I knew that I wanted to sort of stay in this sort of technology realm and IT industry as a whole. And after my MBA, I spent I'm going to sort of like do a high level version of my last 10 years, but I spent, in a product management, product strategy, consultancy around data protection, data security for the most part, right? There's obviously, again, many
Hmm.
facets to this data protection and data security, right? But I've seen the good, the bad, and really the ugly when it comes to protecting data, right? As a general term, right? And again, there's data security, there's secrecy, there's privacy, right? But I've seen it all not only at corporates. I also work for two startups and based out of New York. So I work for two startups in the New York scene. And I've just seen to what extent companies are truly struggling, not only necessarily with compliance, but sort of like, hey, how do we build a structure that protects data, make data secure, private, and then we handle data responsibly, right? Which again,
Right.
like there's all this discussion, but there's no standards. There's no like best practice. Here's how to do it, right? Everyone's like trying to like make stuff on their own. So 2 years ago, I was approached by my friend Milan, who is our head of product. He's someone I've met in undergrad, so we know each other. I always say almost 20 years. He, sort of stayed true to computer science, got his PhD in AI, and he actually founded his first company called Cepage, which was doing AI recommendation sets for travel websites on an anonymized data sets. And that was his sort of
Oh,
first
nice.
experience seeing that it's really hard to build privacy preserving software, right? He was engaged with W3C. This is just around time where GDPR was getting elected 2016, 17, right before the full enforcement
Okay.
in 2018, right? So he saw how hard it is for travel websites not to use cookies but still give you relevant recommendation. That was his sort of thesis of
Right.
building that software. It's okay, how can I, give, for example, Derek's what the software thinks you need without actually knowing that it's Derek, right? And that's where this idea of privacy preserving architecture or privacy first architecture that is all about, that we're all about at BlindNet, that's where this idea came to his mind, right? And then post acquisition, so he sold that company to a large IT vendor, and then after obviously his post acquisition requirements expired, he basically called me and be like, "Hey, Vuk, let's make a company. There's this huge opportunity, there's this big idea, right? That then we can go after as a company." And that's sort of like our journey, right? And then we have a third co-founder, Matt, who comes from the enterprise software sales, so he's on the sales side, but he's been selling for the past 2 years privacy compliant solutions, right? And then when we chatted and they were
Mm.
deciding to join, he's just like, companies are not getting this right. It's like we consider compliance as a sort of post production. We live in a world where software eats everything, right? And I always tell
Right.
investors, it's like we live in a world where like we build software, pushed in production, then we struggle to make this software comply, build trust, protect data. We're just like, well, why don't we just build more robust software? Like why is that idea so crazy to begin with, right? Like, why do we think compliance is like a post-production? You have this beast, now you have to like tame it in production with some sort of processes and whatnot. We're like, okay, and that's exactly what Matt from his sales side realized. Okay, well, it's not sustainable. You can't just like throw more sticks and like red tape around software that it's already in production. Why don't we just build better software? As simple as
Right.
that.
So yeah, so I think that's a great segue into like talking about BlindNet itself. So like where like how does your technology, your software actually work? Like how is it actually
Yeah,
used in practice to
yeah,
ensure that I guess before it gets into prod, that it's
yeah.
compliant, that it's data secure and stuff like that.
Exactly, exactly. So, just to preface this, we've spent last 18 months talking to more than 2 dozen companies, right? Enterprise clients of just understanding like what is really privacy, like what comes down to privacy, right? And we can dive into this differentiation, I guess, in my perspective, between data security, data privacy, and secrecy, like data secrecy. Right?
Okay.
For me, those are like really three distinct concepts, right? So what we define privacy not only with like talking to like again enterprise clients who we sell our software to, but also talking to end consumers, like our literally our friends and just strangers of like, why do you distrust software systems? Not to mention any sort of big tech names out here that we all love to hate, but why do you distrust this software? Well, and then it comes down to like complete lack of transparency of like what is being collected in you, like what they actually hold or derive based on that information and how that information is being used across various products and services, right? And it's very hard for your average consumer, think about, maybe your grandparents, right, to really understand how software works, right? When we talk about
Right.
cookies and whatnot, like what is this information and why is this information transferred from like one hand to another, like hand being the websites? It's like, how is this really like they don't understand the software architecture, right? So like in the VentureBeat op-ed that I posted recently, we talk about okay, as much as we want consumers to take actions, right? It's very hard for them to actually understand. We all fall back on convenience of use, right? So that's why the companies need to do it.
Right.
So to answer your question, what we do, we provide quite essentially a white label privacy portal for companies. We said, hey, why don't you embed your privacy portal, from the get-go, so you have what Apple did with Safety Check 2 weeks ago when they announced iOS 16. They said like now you have this one central all things privacy, all things security for your iPhone, right? We want to give that ability to enterprise companies. When you build your app, your website, whatever it is, you have a white label privacy portal for BlindNet, but it's not just a white label web components. There's the entire infrastructure behind it. Like there's the privacy preserving metadata. So every time you collect information, right, you collect consent and rights for each data element you store in the system. This is sort of a paradigm shift when we think about data discovery, data cataloging. There are a number of companies who are saying like, you have this legacy data, the system acquires something, and then you put crawlers and you have to understand what you hold. We're saying like when you acquire it, like record the consent and those rights, so you're not in limbo of like what you can or cannot do with specific data elements. Like just referring to
Right.
the latest Twitter breach, data privacy breach of Twitter. And then third, what we provide
Yeah.
also is because of the privacy portal and because of the metadata, we automate the processing of privacy requests. What we realize today, it's a big cost burden for companies to employ obviously DPOs or DPO equivalents to process these requests. We sort of estimated that it's around 66 hours to process one privacy request. It's typically like there's an email, sometimes there's even a physical mail coming in and be like, give me access to my data. And then somebody reads it literally and then
Right.
just go and be like, where's the sysadmin? Go to CTO. CTO says, F you, I don't have time to deal with you, right? And there's this like there's this run around the mail for 6 to 6 hours. So it costs close to $7,000 to process one request. So we created an automated process in the
Wow.
back end because we give you this like one-stop shop for all privacy requests. We give you metadata so you have a clear understanding of like what the rights and consents for each data element you collect. We are able to automate the processing of incoming requests. And again, automation is obviously configurable. It could be fully done by the system, by our system, or you obviously you can have a man in the middle, which is quite often the case with our clients. They like to say somebody to say it's like, okay, before we deliver data back to the clients, I want somebody to do that. Needless to say, all of the systems, all of the actions of the systems are logged, so it's much easier for you to go to compliance and regulators be like, hey, look, there's this very traceable like audit log um, of the events of the system. So that's really beneficial for companies. So that's what we do. I always end, my pitch on Blindnet. If you're a fan of Oprah, like she goes, there's these memes on social media where she goes like, you get a car and you get a car. I always say Blindnet is like, you get a privacy
Yeah.
portal and you get a privacy portal, and that's what we do. Again, it's
Okay.
it's obviously the back end is the heart or the brain of the system, but it's quite essential. We want to embed privacy portals in every app and websites out there.
So I guess this is kind of like the opposite end of like OneTrust is one of these companies who builds this portal so that you can pick and choose which trackers are allowed to track you around the internet and therefore allowed to embed cookies in your browser. So this I guess this is kind of the opposite end. So like, on the front end you visit f1.com is probably the most egregious one I've come across recently, where I feel like I don't accept all, and I don't necessarily reject all. I want to see the list. It is a massive list. It's like 150 different data collection companies and all their cookies and all these reasons, quote unquote, for putting a cookie on your browser and collecting all this data. It's a massive list. So assuming F1 wanted to or needed to then give you access on the back end, like because you can have an account, that this would be on the opposite end. You visit f1.com for the first time, you agree or don't agree to some of the trackers and all that, and then whatever data f1.com is collecting about you as you use the site, Blindnet's solution could be on the opposite end there. Then you could fill out the form, and ideally within a few hours or one day, they spit back out.
Correct.
You get emailed all that data that they've collected about you.
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right, right? So think of this as, you go to your account and you have your privacy portal, and there you can say, hey, I want access to my data. I want transparency. So there's actually very defined 17 stuff that a user can request. So we provide you the infrastructure for all those 17, so you don't have to build anything from scratch on your own, right? And like one of the key metrics, obviously it's 80/20. It's like most people want access, modification, deletion, and transparency. Transparency being like, tell me what you have on me and tell me why you're holding the data on me, right? It's literally that simple. And we provide that, again, the white label component in the back end to execute that
Mm-hmm.
seamlessly, right? And that's like exactly, so for your example in F1, so you use the application website normally, and then you would be like, go to your account, privacy portal, we're white label again, so like many discussions we had, like what do we want to be known as a brand to end consumers or not, but like you would go to a privacy portal, right, run by Blindnet in the background, right, and then you can say, hey, F1, I see you use all these cookies, tell me what you collected me, tell me what's the consent, tell me rights, right, and then once you get that back, you can be like, well, I consent that you collect this information, or I revoke consent, right? Now you
Mm-hmm.
have, according
Mm-hmm.
to GDPR and CCPA, that's unfortunately only for California residents here, but in Canada you have CPPA, right? So like, as like every Canadian is protected, so you can be like, hey, you need to give me this. Like this is actually law. You
Yeah, yeah.
have to comply and you have to address this in 30 days, right? So that's what Blindnet goes for. It's like we want to give F1 and every website and app out there a privacy portal.
So to that extent, I don't know if you're working with F1 right now,
We're
but
not.
what are some of the brands that you are working with? And that's too bad because I swear I want to get your perspective on like the most egregious actor when it comes to data collection up front. But first, I want to ask about like what brands is Blindnet working with today that are have implemented this and are actually seeing like are ideally I guess making their customers happier
Yeah.
because they can actually get this data to them in a reasonable
Yeah.
amount of time.
So it's typically what we see in companies in a traditionally regulated industry. So financial services, healthcare insurance, as well as legal services, right? These are services, these are industries that
Oh,
are dealing with extremely sensitive information, right? And they want obviously to convey the sense of security and then obviously the sense of privacy, right? So like this security as a service has evolved over the past 30 years. Like, and again, these companies are now saying like, oh, we use all these secure solution, right? But again, the privacy is all about, in our perspective, giving you, the data owner, rights to access that data that is stored in a third-party system. So like if Derek sends your like employee contract to your lawyer, you still want to be able to say, hey, lawyer, Mr. Lawyer, Mrs. Lawyer, like I want access to my information that is stored in your system. It's needed for you to do your
right.
service, but like Derek wants access. I want to know what you hold on me, right? So we go and this is exactly like, and again, we have clients in financial services, in insurance and legal, healthcare. For HIPAA reasons, we avoid because we're a relatively small startup, so we're still not fully HIPAA certified, even though we provide the data
Okay.
required by HIPAA in the United States. But again, we're not certified at this moment. But these are typically some industries that said like, hey, we're dealing with consumers, right? And we want to give them rights to access their personal information. And again, it's not just consumers. We have a company in financial services that is, a B2B, quite essentially dealing with businesses. They're handling business information, but regardless, you still want to be able, there's an entity that is giving you information, whether it's an end
Right.
consumer or a company that is, again, represented by humans. They're sending you some information and you want to be able, like, I need to track this information. At any point when that entity requests access, deletion, modification, transparency, anything, I need to be able to respond that in a timely fashion, right? And beyond, right, again, data privacy is, as you probably aware, and probably a majority of your listeners, data privacy and data security is something that is very horizontal. So it's not just like only these industries care about this and the others do not care. What we've seen, we don't have a client, but we have had discussion with a dating website, and they were just like, there's a lot of
Mm.
sensitive, very private information that people put on their dating
Yeah.
profiles, right? And they want to be able to, give them access to all the information that is being stored in the system. Yeah, there's your profile. You can edit your profile, what's like about me and what you're looking for. That's great. But at the end of the day, you don't actually know where the system is being stored, like whether that information is parsed and like taken there and then you're being profiled, da 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 da. Like what is this, data
Yeah. Yeah.
science team behind are doing? Like how is, I'm not saying that they're doing it, just a hypothesis, like how is Match.com really matching in the background? Like what are they actually parsing and doing with my
Hmm.
profile?
Hmm.
So like just tracking all of this data is, and again, the client that I was mentioning, it was not Match.com, so obviously I don't know what they're doing in terms of privacy, but that was an interesting
Not
discussion
yet.
how the company was like, it just came out of a left field. It's like, okay, there's a dating website that it's like, concerned about privacy, but it makes sense. Again, data privacy is horizontal. It's not just, oh, financial service insurance or like very sensitive, highly confidential information. It's like, well, data privacy is not about whether it's something confidential or not. It's my information. Even if you just my name, it's my data, and I have the right to access, delete, revoke consent, da 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 da.
Yeah. So are you mostly working with medium and large enterprises then? Because I can think of all sorts of small businesses, like even ones that like friends of mine run, where they're probably not organized enough to comply, or like they don't normalize their storage practices well enough, I think, to actually comply with
Yeah.
privacy requests, like using the form. It'd be like, okay, cool, the form comes in, and like if we don't want that person in the middle, we can just send the data back out. I know lots of businesses who would I don't think would be organized enough to do that in a short amount of time. There would still be some manual work involved.
That is a great question. We do. So the short answer is like yes, we do with SMBs. We work with SMBs and offer them one specific use case that is fully not data secure, but also offer them a solution that complies with data privacy regulation. So our focus as a company is on enterprise sales. And again, this whole idea, give everyone a privacy portal. But when we were
Hmm.
starting this company, we actually got pulled from exactly from the type of clients that you just described, the small SMBs who are just like, I'm feeling the burn, but I don't have a CTO, like I don't have developers, right? I just need something. I'm collecting this
Right.
data over unsecured channels or emails or whatnot or Dropbox, right? And it's like, but like I can't track it. I have to like maintain some random spreadsheet if somebody comes back and asks data, like I
Hmm.
have to do that. So what we developed using our the power of infrastructure. So this whole infrastructure we call it privacy stack. So we do have a user-facing
Okay.
application called Private Form. And think of this private form as like a Google form or a type form competitor. So it's a form-like data collection, but it comes with the full benefit of our privacy stack, of the infrastructure that we've developed. Like there is the end-to-end encryption when it comes to data collection, and there's obviously data consent and rights management and execution of DSARs, of the incoming subject requests, privacy requests, right? So you can collect
Okay.
information, and at the same time, the collection ends saying, well, now you as the user have rights to access the lead. You can submit this information. You get a link saying, like, this is the link to your information. This is where the information is stored, whether it's EU or somewhere in North America, right? So you said, like, okay, and then you can access the data, right? And then that person on the other end who is the admin or whatever, the SMB owner, can, like, the system tells me like, hey, there's this incoming request, this person wants to access data, this person is requesting to delete information, right? And then you as the
Right.
administrator or the user of the application say like, well, I cannot delete the data because I have this regulation, I have to hold it. Like you can, manage these privacy requests very easily. And again, this is what we actually saw from
Okay.
the SMBs very early on. There's like, oh, I have to do it, and I'm kind of just doing it from like various sort of very manually through various applications, and we said like, hey, we can actually offer that to SMB. So we do, yes, but our focus is again is on enterprise. We cannot, as a small startup, we cannot boil the ocean. We have to be very focused, so we focus on enterprise.
I think you've actually done the opposite. I think you've gone the blue ocean strategy instead. For anybody who's familiar with that, because I think you've done something completely new. At least as far as I know. Like I don't know any other companies who are trying to make this process easy for both the consumer to request the data or to ask for a deletion of the data, like you said, and for the company to more easily comply. Like I've heard all sorts of horror stories of companies trying to comply with GDPR requests, whether they need to put their own developers on, putting together a tool or doing a lot of the stuff that you guys are more or less automating or offering in that white label manner.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So the
so yeah,
idea,
it
like,
doesn't sound like you're boiling the ocean at
it's
all.
interesting how, like you mentioned, so like Peter and their developers, like there, and again, we do have competitors. We're not gonna,
Okay.
we don't have to deep dive into what some of the competitors are doing and how they're approaching. Right, for that part, we have the similar strategy. But what is really interesting to me is something that you just mentioned, which like struck a chord with me, is that clients we talk to, they haven't even heard about competitors. So it just tells me how mundane and how, for the lack of a better word, how confused people are, what they actually need to do and
Mhm.
how to go about it. And all of them came to realization, I don't know how and who was advising them, but they're going to build it on their own. And there are very big companies in the Valley, San Francisco, who spent millions of dollars over the last 2 years trying to build an internal tool
Yeah.
similar to Blindnet, literally just like create a portal, create this like tracker, and can automate this. And I don't want to mention any names, obviously, but they've employed. I think the team is around 24 FTEs, so most of them in engineers. There's some project manager or whatnot, and
Wow.
it's like, I mean, just take an
Yeah.
average total cost of like, I don't know, 150 or 200K for like a senior developer. So they're burning, give or take like 6, 7, 8 million a year, and it's just, and they're still not. It's like a
Jesus.
total shit show still. Like 2.5 years in, they started right before the pandemic, right? So it's like they're 2.5 years in, and they're still like don't have a system that can actually spit out privacy requests easily, or give the ability to, like, which is for me is sort of like very mind blowing. And like, how are you not dealing with it? So I see the power of software as a service. Like you give it to the experts, you give it to people who are thinking, who are living and breathing this data privacy, data security, day in, day out, and that's where we as a Blindnet come in. So it's not just compliance, we're cost saving, and then very, very importantly, like we always focus on compliance, we focus on cost, but it's actually the revenue. Well, the reason, like if you look at our website, we start about talking about trust, because that's
Hmm.
ultimately the what sells solution like Blindnet to companies, is like this, like, well, you build trust with your end customers, like you improve customer retention, you improve customer acquisition. Like I cannot even tell you, these SMBs who are using this service private form I mentioned to you, just the very fact, once you collect data, the system tells like, hey, you have access to your data now. It's not a black box. It's just like their end clients are telling
Right.
them, they're like, oh, it's so cool you guys do that. Like I trust you now, right? It's sort of like you build
Hmm.
that trust. Like at the very end, this message be like, hey, here's your link. With this link, you can access data, you can delete it. It's like it's as simple as that, but like people are like, oh, this is cool. Like it's not like some black pit, black hole goes into Google immediately. Right? The end clients, their clients of our small private firm users, SMBs, they're just like, oh, we already heard from our clients saying like, oh, it's really cool that you guys do that. It's like you build that trust. For us, it's like,
Hmm.
okay, compliance, sure, cost, sure, but it's really the revenue, like that we wanna, work with our enterprise clients to be like, hey, this is how you actually, talk about it, right? And on our website, that we actually run a full-blown customer survey, like what that means, for them, like how they perceive systems and websites, right? And then what we realized is that everybody thinks immediately that everyone's a bad actor, right? So if you're a good
Right.
actor, right? I'm just poking jokes here. If you're not F1, you really have to be very vocal that you're not abusing trust, that you're really protecting trust. So you have to place it somewhere and be like, hey, we
Right.
really, like, you can still collect information. I'm not like against cookies or anything, but like be very transparent and be very upfront of what you're doing, and then obviously give what we stand for, data privacy, give end user rights and to access, modify, delete their personal information. And that's how we go about.
Yeah. Terrific. Um, Shoot, I was going to ask a follow-up question. Oh, I was going to say, my first time I went to San Jose or San Francisco, like that area. I got on Caltrain from or from where? From Cupertino to San Francisco. Everyone around me was working at Facebook or Twitter or Google. So I would say if you're going to do some advertising, you should probably just advertise on the Caltrain between San Jose or Cupertino and San Francisco, because you'll probably get a bunch of or hit a bunch of potential clients in that region. But I'll let you spend your money how you want to spend it on
Well,
marketing.
so right, and we're, again, we go back to these big tech giants, and we'll, as I mentioned earlier, we love to hate them, and it's like I'm not against Facebook. I think, Facebook can still exist as long as you provide transparency and clarity on what you do and how you do with the data, and give end user options
Right.
in a very clear and easy, intuitive fashion. Give users option to revoke consent and provide transparency to it. Like private, like people don't know, but Facebook does have a privacy portal. The unfortunate piece, which is what Californian legislator called this a shadow pattern, is that it's so buried deep that unless you're really proficient and
Yeah.
really understanding the architecture, and you go to settings and you go to this and you go to there and da 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 da, it's like there's no way
Yeah.
my mom is gonna
It's five
figure it out. It's
clicks.
like there's no, she doesn't even understand.
Yeah.
She's so scared to click settings that it's like she calls me every time she needs to like change her It's like, this, like, okay, but then you ask Facebook, they go to Congress, we're like, oh my God, but we provide privacy. But yeah, but it's very, not upfront. It's very unclear. And this is what I was telling you with our study. It's like you really
Yeah.
have to say, I am a good guy on the internet. Like I am really protecting you. And here's the privacy portal. Like, why is it so hard to have like, Apple Safety Check? It's like front and center now in the iOS system. It's like create this privacy portal. This is my way to control what the system has on me. And we always go back to when we talk to our clients is like how we build relationship in real life, right? It's that's why I was explaining in my VentureBeat op-ed. It's like, you disclose information. I want to be best friends with Derek. It's like we would create experiences that would divulge more and more information about how I think my values, right?
Right.
And it's like at one point I would say like I don't want to be friends with Derek anymore. I walk away. I quote unquote revoke consent. And it's like I walk away from system. I walk away
Yeah.
from entity, right? But you can't do that online today. It's sort of like we know how to act with like humans, and we've sort of perfect, not necessarily perfect, but we're perfecting the human to human interactions, and like why can't we replicate that in digital arena? And that's what we are doing with Blindnet.
Actually, I find all these, you call out in that VentureBeat article about the fact that like, in a lot of jurisdictions, you now have to ask for permission to place a cookie on somebody's device. And I always find it really odd that there's often this required cookies. I'm like, there's no such thing as a required cookie. You don't need to put a cookie on my device. I
Yeah,
know you don't, but I find that I find it really odd that there's always some required or necessary cookie. And then I think I've actually I would call them dark patterns, or you mentioned shadow patterns, where it's like the default is like the where they're trying to bring your attention to is very much the I accept all. And like
yeah.
now I've got 150 new cookies from 150 different random companies, most of which I've never heard of, on my device because I accept it all. And because that's where
That's it. Yeah.
you convinced your UX designer or UI
Well,
designer to put the
already
emphasis.
like, already regulators have said like this is not okay, and GDPR is actually going even
Yeah.
forward to say like these buttons need to be the same size, and it's like, they're trying to
Yeah.
regulate almost like standardize. We always had this discussion of like why every website, which is also that is a very fractionate and very annoying user experience. Speaking from mine, like I hate when you go to a website and I have to like, and I'm like, why don't
Yeah.
we have the settings in a browser? So why does my browser not communicating with a website be like, hey, here's Vuk's preference, respect it, right? Like why do I have to go to like every single website and say like this is my preference and really try to click through and understand everything? To some extent, like Apple can do that easily through the safety check. Be like, hey, record your preference for the cookies, and then Safari can easily just communicate that to the websites. Be like, here's the preference, take it or leave it.
Right.
Right? And it's
Yeah.
like, I think again, we're not there, but I think this is also a really good startup idea. It's like, hey, what if you create something that is just like like automate this like this very annoying nuance, but also very important stuff. Like it's important, but like it's also annoying to end users to go to websites and be like, oh my God, okay, yes, no,
Yeah.
like through, show me more, I only use necessary and stuff. It's like no, I just want to avoid that at all.
Yeah. I feel like one of those is eventually going to be like you're agreeing to like installing something like Stuxnet, on your device. I'm like, no, I don't want spyware, full on spyware. Um, and like just to your point, and then we got to start wrapping up here. Just to your point about GDPR, trying to regulate that sort of thing. That sucks too. Like laws, I know Europe has a very prescriptive model, whereas the US and Canada have more of like a goals based model for regulation. And the goal should be exactly that. Like it should be as it should be as simple as you need to provide a clear, non-discriminatory, non-influential, or without dark pattern way of letting the user know these are the things you'd like to put on their device, the cookies you want to put on their device, or the trackers that they're agreeing to, and make it very simple for them to agree to all, reject all, or make some changes. The problem I have, especially when I do want to make changes, because I'm like, I very rarely hit reject all because I'm okay with like there's probably a chance that I'm going to sign into this website. I'm going to make some
Yeah,
configuration
there's
changes,
some
and I
basic
want those
stuff.
to
Yeah.
stick. Yeah, and that's fine. If you want to use a cookie for that, so I don't need to log in, that's even better because then I don't even need to make an account. Or maybe it's not better, but it's a good option to have. But it's the I want to make changes, and you're like, and like this is especially on mobile. You like you said, it is an awful experience, and so that's when I am often like, okay, forget it, reject all. I
Yeah, yeah, but
don't,
that's
I
the problem. It's like
don't
you
want anything,
become
and then they lose, and potentially I lose some convenience too. Like we've both, that's a lose lose situation because you made it harder for me to differentiate between the stuff that might be valuable to me, just might, and you know the company and XYZ companies whose trackers you're embedding to collect at least a little bit of data and maybe make my experience better. But you've made it so difficult to get to that point. I'm like, screw it, reject all
yeah.
of them.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's like the experience is really, really awful, and you know, when you look at what we offer as a privacy portal as like the things that that you have to provide, they're very descriptional in a sense that, like you don't necessarily like when somebody submits a request for transparency, it's about the categories of data, right? It's not necessarily like, oh, where is this data flowing in terms of like the third-party systems, which again, there is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
categories like, are you sharing with third-party systems, right? So it's like somebody needs to know, but it's very, what I'm trying to say, it's very digestible for end user who is very likely not technical, just to be like, okay, this is in a plain, simple language, okay, instead of giving me like, oh, like, do you want this data shared with this website? It's like, just like, tell me why you're sharing this data with this third-party website, and then I can
yeah.
decide yes or no. I think that is very important. One thing that I sort of you mentioned just is as we were part of getting into this conversation about like GDPR and CCPA, Europe being very descriptive, prescriptive versus like US and Canada being more goal oriented. Like, and I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I think Europe is really going out on the limb to be like that. This is how you have to do it. It's like we're gonna like create a framework
Tell me how to design my
for the
website.
internet, right? And the same thing, I have the problem with a bunch of US regulations when it comes to data privacy because there's just like you mentioned, like, oh, best practice, and I guaranteed you
Mm,
walk into every single executive discussion, they'll tell you we're doing the best practice. Like, and then becomes like,
yeah,
well, your baby's ugly, so let's start there. And you're not, it's like your best practice. You might think this is the best effort, but it's not. So it becomes sort of like
yeah,
no one's gonna say they're bad actors. No one's gonna say like, oh, we're not trying. Everyone's gonna say we're doing our best effort. But it's unfortunately your best
yeah,
effort is not enough, and it's costly, right? And that's winning. It's also great because that's an opportunity for Blindnet, right? We that's exactly sort of the opportunity we're going after. But like in terms of prescription, like I am somewhere in the middle. I don't know how I would write this data privacy regulations if I was obviously in that seat, in that hot seat, but I'm somewhere in the middle. I think US is a little too vague. I think
sure.
GDPR is in some parts like very prescriptive, um, but I think that the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Okay, fair enough. Uh, Maybe we can end off on describing some challenges and even some definitions for some of the terms you use, and maybe I think people are going to start hearing about more often. Well, what are some of the challenges around implementing privacy programs, privacy as code, which I guess you might be able to also think of as privacy by design, and the difference between privacy and secrecy, because you've mentioned those two words, and I feel like the way you talk, there's some nuance between privacy and secrecy.
Yeah. So challenges. I think um, companies today see this as I mentioned earlier, as a post-production, purely legal and compliance fashion, right? You have this beast of software that you have to tame, and this beast is just acting the way CTOs, engineers have intended it to act, not necessarily like how the legal or the CEO or the CMO or the CRO, like every non-technical executive, every non-technical person wanted it to
Yeah.
act, right? So there is this misaligned incentive within an organization. And then the second challenge is aligning incentives, right? CTOs it's changing. It's changed a lot over the last 10 or 15 years, but CTOs for a lot of organizations, they're a cost center, right? They do have a lot of money and a lot of budgets, but at the end of the day, they're spread thin. So when you come to them and you're like, oh, there's this new thing, you have to literally break your architecture in order to allow privacy engineering and privacy as code to be, or like they just like have an immediate like heart attack, or they start like hyperventilating because it's just like, oh yeah, like that requires like additional 10 engineers and 3 years of development in order for my application to run and implement this. We're coming in and saying like we're actually
Yeah.
simple and easy solution. We're starting small. It's like typical land and expand strategy. We start with one use case or one sort of product or service that and then obviously you can gradually expand Blindnet into an enterprise solution. But that's sort of the challenge. The challenge is like finding these time, resources, and money to do this. But then number one, align the organization. It's like you can have a less headache in production, right? Just realizing that, like creating that, like you need that CEO, you need an executive decision, be like, okay, this is, it's going to be painful in the next 6 months, but we're going to be stronger at the end. So I think that's the
Hmm.
challenge. The second part of the question about the difference between privacy and secrecy. So privacy, a lot of people confuse privacy in our view with secrecy. Like, let's have a private conversation. So like you're trying to like you think you're being secretive. You think you're like, sort of like divulging or disclosing some information that is very secret. And it's like what you're actually doing, literally in real life, when you say, let's have a private conversation, you're controlling who has access to the information you're about to say, right? And for
Right.
us, is privacy is control, your end user control of your information. You say, let's have a private conversation. You took that person, so I'm controlling who's receiving that information. I'm not being secretive about it. Everybody in your room saw us walking to the corner, right? And like, if I wanted to be
Okay. Yeah.
secret, I would text you in Signal and be like, meet me in a parking lot at 4 a.m. That is secrecy,
Mm.
right? Like like nobody else, like what you guys are doing, onion writing, which I consider it's privacy and secrecy. It's like nobody can really track my information on the internet, but we think of privacy as your end right to control the information, your information,
Okay.
how it is being stored, and why it is being used, right? Secrecy is also an added layer on top of like controlling access to the information, like who can access that information. Again, this analogy in real life, you control it, be like, I just want this person to hear this, what I'm about to say, and that is secrecy for us.
Okay. Almost like brandishing something top secret and therefore it can only be shared with certain government officials, for example.
Yeah, right. But
And
like, and
and how
again,
that's
it's
done
it's
is
it's
obviously,
it's an extension of that,
sorry.
right? Secrecy for us is an extension of privacy, right? They're not competing, but they're different. Like
Mhm,
privacy
mhm.
for us is the right. It's, when you read 150-year-old Harvard article that privacy is a human right, it's all about that control of information. And that's what we're trying to do online, this ability to
Right.
control the information you disclose to a third-party system.
Awesome. Vuk, if somebody wants to learn more about BlindNet or maybe wants to stay in touch with some of your thoughts that you're putting out there, like what are the best sources for them to visit?
Yeah, absolutely. We are open to connect necessarily like people like-minded people like yourself and companies like Orchid. Like you can reach me at Vuk, that's VUK at blindnet.io, or you can just write to our general email. We do have a contact form at hello@blindnet.io. We are running multiple sort of, not multiple studies. I want to say it's like we don't have resources to run multiple studies, but we have had multiple studies in the past where we really sort of interview people and try to understand really like what it means to have a private, secure, and or secret connection to the digital world. So like again, we're definitely open to partner and have discussions with like-minded people.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And for everybody listening or watching, until next time, stay free.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek.